Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I left the world of corporate IT behind 3 years ago to write about technology and record these daily tech podcasts. And yes, 3 years out of IT is a lifetime, but rest assured, I do still have IT blood running through these veins. But one thing that always fascinated me was that for consumers, if you have a problem, you can speak to a chatbot, a support agent, or just log an incident online. But for the unsung IT engineers and developers and DevOps teams, they don't have the luxury of having somebody else find those answers for them because they're the guys and dolls expected to have the answers. But between me and you, techies love to collaborate, and they will speak with other techies on forums all over the internet and enjoy sharing ideas and finding solutions to problems and helping others find solutions to problems. So when I came across a company called Paritis AI, which is an AI recommendation for technical support, I felt compelled to find out more. So today I've invited Robin onto the show, who is the co-founder and CEO of Paritis AI, to discuss how they're tackling the issue of providing technical support for developers and engineers. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California so we can speak with him now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Robin. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Robin Purohit. I'm the CEO of Paritis.ai. So we're a Silicon Valley-based startup, and we're working on a vision to enable zero-touch customer service for the tech industry. And I've been in the industry a long time, 20 years in the software industry here in the Bay Area. And before that, I'm a native-born Canadian and sold my first startup to HP way back in the 90s.
I was going to say that because I did do a little bit of research on you before you came on the podcast. I always try and find out a bit of background information, and I quickly learned that you were previously a senior executive at BMC and HP Software, where you led multi-billion-dollar business units for IT management, application delivery, and security. But the question I've got to ask is, where did your love for technology come from, and what put you on this path? Is there any particular moment that springs to mind?
Yeah, it kind of started early and by accident, I would say. I was always a naturally curious person and just loved to solve puzzles and problems. So when the first computer started showing up in high school, the problem was we got a lot of computers, but there was nothing to do with them because there's no software. So I kind of taught myself how to be a developer, or what we called a programmer back in those days. And as word got around, I started getting all sorts of job offers to write software and teach people how to write it and how to use their computers. So I kind of fell into it that way, and just fell in love with everything from building products and communicating about them, quite frankly, and teaching people how to use them.
So here in 2021, Paritis AI is a startup that is tackling the issue of providing technical support for developers and engineers. But can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of problems that you're solving with technology for your customers?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Our mission is to just help solve technical questions faster. I think that the nature of this industry is technology is moving so fast, is so complex, and is so intertwined that we need to find more ways to help people succeed with all this amazing technology, particularly in the enterprise space where the stakes are quite high. So what we're using is a machine learning engine that actually looks at all of these public conversations and content that's out there and helps people answer questions on particularly community forums. So big ones like Stack Overflow, which have over 125 million active developers using it every month, to vendor forums from big companies like Cisco, HP, or Dell.
And AI chatbots for customer support are getting significant attention and indeed investment in industries ranging from retail to financial services to employee help desk. But can you tell me a little bit more about the important area that has been neglected? And I believe, like I said a few moments ago, is support for engineers and developers who are driving that IT innovation, because it seems like a huge gap there. But could you expand on that?
Yeah, if you think of when you have a technical problem, usually it's quite nuanced. It's not an obvious question. Or if it is, you'd find it with search, right? You go do a Google search and you're good with keywords, you'll find the answer pretty quickly. So usually for a technical problem, you want to describe it with some specialized language that's unique to the product and the problem. And you want to hear from people who are kind of experts in your field. And that's what's driven a lot of activity on these community forums. Now, the problem is there's been very few things that help people answer those questions. So our mission really, how do you take all this amazing knowledge that's out there and help people answer all those rich, nuanced questions faster, where there might be a gray area that needs some human involvement and judgment versus some, automated, cartoony like bot, telling you he thinks it knows what your problem and your answer is.
And if I look back at my IT career, I would suspect that technical users have very little patience for pre-wired chatbots without industry context. And traditionally, I think they view opening a support ticket as a last resort. Is that right?
Totally. I mean, if you think of I've had many help desk products in my career that I've owned and built and marketed. So I kind of heard this, firsthand from all of my customers. When you ask people to take a ticket, what are you telling them? You're telling them to wait in line, right? And so if you're a technical person with something important you want to resolve, that's the last thing you want to hear. So if you have a really critical issue and you're a really important customer, you're going to get a lot of attention. But most of the time, you're just told to wait in line, and it could be a couple of weeks before you get your answer. So instead, what engineers do is they try to, go to these forums and ask their question where they might find somebody who wants to help them. Chatbots, we're pretty excited about the future chatbots, but, really they're very good today at answering simple, high-volume questions, which doesn't really fit with the tech industry. So it might work for you in the consumer world, where it's just much better than sitting on hold or going through a voice response system. But if you're an engineer, you just have no patience for those things because it's not adding value to the problem that you have.
And it was only, I think it was last month that I noticed that Paritis had announced the results of your first IT industry forum benchmark. And it examined over 12 million posts and responses on over 50 leading IT industry forums for vendors and open source technologies such as Cisco, MongoDB and Kubernetes. But I'm curious, what kind of insights did you uncover in that?
Yeah, we should probably talk first about why we decided to do it. I mean, by the way, we published all of this on our website, so anybody can go and browse, the top level results by each forum. So we've published all that for the right in the open. So look, we were looking at forums and noticed that there is a pretty long lag time to get your question answered, and it also varied a lot depending on the nature of the forum. And so our instinct was, hey, we can really help solve this problem. But to start the ball going, we decided to analyze it and share what we learned. So, generally, on the average of all of these 50 forums, we found that about 31% of questions are answered. So huge number of questions that just go answered forever. Mm-hmm. And if you think of something that might be important, you really want it answered in the first day, right? And there we found about 20% of the questions were answered in the first day, right? So that's the average. Now, when we also looked at who are the best of the best, just so we can learn where the benchmark is, and we found that roughly their best were doing 2x better. So 60% of the questions were answered and 20% in less than 24 hours. And generally, those were open source technologies. So that's the top level result. If you go on our website, again, you can browse any of these forums where we show the results in quite some detail with all sorts of other interesting insights.
Did anything surprise you in that report?
Yeah, the biggest surprise, which for us is an opportunity, is that only 20% of the active forum participants are answering 80% of the questions.
Wow.
Right? So really the load is being shouldered by a small number of highly motivated people. More interesting maybe than that even is the best of the best, so which was an open source forum, I think it was in Genix, had 70% of the people answering 80% of the questions. So that's an indication of a very vibrant, engaged community where the expertise is kind of more broadly distributed, which is really where we want to get the industry, where every forum should be like that.
And back in my IT days, I do remember taking the ITIL examination. And there's one phrase that always stuck with me was when a techie has to Google something or a search engine of their choice. It was always referred to as, in ITIL language, as knowledge-based outsourcing, which always made me smile. But as an AI recommendation engine for technical support and for those techies that are doing things, can you provide me with maybe a use case that would just allow any techies listening to understand how it would work and how it would help them?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's basically two people I'd like to talk about. One is a person who has a question, right? Yeah. So if you have a question and your quick Google search doesn't yield a perfect answer, then you're going to post your question on a forum, right? Whether it's the vendor forum or one of these open sites like Stack Overflow, right? And then, so hopefully what you really want is to get an informed answer by somebody you trust within the first day, hopefully within the first couple of hours. So what we do is we provide an assistant for those people that want to help answer the questions. So as they're looking at the questions pop up in these forums, we have a little browser extension that pops up and says, hey, we can help you answer these questions. And it will give you some recommended answers based on our machine learning techniques. And then we rely on the human judgment of the expert to pick the best answers and actually help them write the answer and then post it in their name so they get all the credit. So what we're trying to do is kind of shorten the loop between question and answer and empower the people who are motivated most to be helpful, be successful. And at the end result, you improve their reputation on the forum.
I love that. I love how you're using technology to solve those problems. But we are in a new year of opportunity. So I've got to ask, what excites you about the year ahead in technology?
Yeah, look, so one of the things we did, we didn't only analyze all of these forums, but we built a big machine learning data set out of all of that data. And so what that's allowed us to do is to pre-train this AI assistant to be able to answer questions on these forums, in the hands of these experts. So we're going to be really focused on building a large user community of community experts that we can help with our assistant this year, both on these big public sites like Stack Overflow and these vendor communities from Cisco and Mongo, et cetera.
And I'm curious, as someone right in the heart of this industry, and you've got the ear of a lot of techies out there, are there any trends that you're noticing in the kind of conversations that they're having with you and asking you for help with? Yeah,
and the big thing that's happening right now is, the DevOps movement is really embracing cloud native technologies, whether that's on-premise with open source or, packaged with, by one of the big vendors or in the cloud. But people are really investing in transforming their existing applications and building new cloud native stuff, right? And so we finally got to that trigger point. The trouble is it's a very complex transition. The technologies are moving super fast. There's a lot of different variants of them. So we're really trying to help the enterprise DevOps teams embrace these cloud native technologies and be successful. It's not like the consumer world where you can move fast and break things. You got to make things work, as you know, and it's got to be not only high quality, but it's got to be compliant with all your security and regulatory policies. So it's a different game in the enterprise than the consumer world. So that's a big area of focus for our company.
And I've also noticed, obviously, we're approaching nearly a year now of lockdowns, and we're going to have some DevOps teams that have been recruited online. They were interviewed online, and they've probably never even met their fellow teammates. Have you seen any challenges around that in DevOps teams where everyone's remotely distributed elsewhere?
That's the way we run our team, by the way. So we have offices virtually in the US, Canada, and India, and we're all over the place. So it's actually fairly straightforward to collaborate on software in a globally distributed way now. So I think what's happening, is going to accelerate now is that online collaboration on building and supporting software. That's very innovative, but also works really well. That's just the way of the world, right? So we really want to enable that and allow people to embrace that fully and be successful with it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. But before I do let you go, is there anything else you can share with the road ahead for you guys and how you're helping enable your customers?
Well, really, I just encourage people to check out our site. We published a lot of our analysis on the website, and we've actually opened up the product to a free trial so you can kick the tires on your own if you're interested. And if you have some advice or a question, you can reach us via our website, www.Peritus.ai. And you can see our Twitter handle or our LinkedIn handle, or you can even send an email to us right from the website.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog post that will accompany this episode. It is going to be a year where technology is going to continue to move at breakneck speed, but equally, I read somewhere somebody said, I think it was last year, that it's never going to move this slow again, and it's such a challenge, but we're all in this together. But I'd love to get you back on later in the year, see how your journey's going, but more than anything, thanks for joining me today.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me today.
If you ever wondered where techies troubleshooted problems and look for answers and help others, now you know. And it is important to highlight that technical users have very little patience for pre-wired chatbots without industry context and view opening a support ticket as the last possible resort, especially when some of the biggest tech companies in the world have possibly the worst technical support in the world too. And we all know who they are. But if you do have a tech background and you're listening to this podcast now, I do urge you to check out the Paritis IT Industry Forum benchmark that examined over 12 million posts and responses on over 50 leading IT industry forums for vendors and open source technologies such as Cisco, MongoDB and Kubernetes. Because that benchmark study zeroed in on 4 useful metrics: the number of posts that were resolved, how quickly the average length to resolve each post was resolved, whether posts were resolved by the first response, and how many experts from that global community answered the bulk of the questions. And that benchmark includes overall industry average, best-in-class platforms, and comparisons for each vendor in the best-in-class forums too. And there is some eye-watering stats in there. So I will include a link on the blog post that will accompany this episode over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. Have a look. Let me know what you think. If you've got any questions or any insights that you'd like to share today, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can also connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just look for @NeilCHughes. But please don't just send over one of those soulless connection requests and just hit follow or connect. Send a little message. Tell me you've listened to the podcast. I'd love to have a real conversation with you too. So I cannot thank Robin enough for coming on and sharing a little bit about Paritis and the insights from that report. And more than anything, a big thank you to each and every one of you that have put aside 25 minutes to listen to this episode today. And I do ask that you join me again tomorrow and we'll tackle another problem together. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.